Welcome. This is Chuck Ridgway. I'm the Automation Technology Manager here at Horner. Sorry for that little countdown glitch. You know, every week it's something new. We gotta love this technology, right? All right, so today we think we've got a great topic for you, and that happens to be language translation for Horner OCS All-in-one Controllers. So, you know, in this global economy, OEMs want to be able to ship their machines around the world, and regardless of the language being used by the operator, they need their machines to be able to be run efficiently. So language translation is a feature in the Horner OCS controllers that for our OEMs using our products, it gives them the opportunity to support that multiple language type environment. Now, we've also got a little bit of a bonus topic for you today, and that is font handling. Now, why are we covering font handling at the same time we're covering language translation? Well, it's simple. In a lot of multilingual type applications, you might have to bring in a custom font that maybe has a different character set, which is required by certain languages, that sort of thing. And whether or not you're in a multi-language type situation or not, we think that the bonus topic of font handling will be very useful. Because who knows, you might want to add an extra large font or some other font to your project that has nothing to do with language. And we're going to show you how to do that today. So I'd like to bring in my partner in crime, Mr. Casey Gardner. How we doing, Casey?
Hey, not too bad. How's it going, Chuck?
Doing great. As always, Casey is going to be manning the chat. He's going to be answering any questions you might have, providing whatever information he can to kind of supplement what's going on with the topic. And we always appreciate Casey's efforts. All right, and also joining us, we have in the background, we have Marcy Tyree, everything marketing. That's Marcy here at Horner. She schedules these live streams. She does a lot of the graphics that you see. You name it at Horner, she's doing it. And trying to keep the web guys in line at the same time, it's a tough job, but she's doing a great job. Hey, Casey, before we get started in the topic, do you have that swag there with you?
I've got it hiding over here.
All right, very good. Excellent. So we have a highly sought after Horner coffee cup that we're going to be giving away as Horner swag today. And it's going to be later on during the demonstration part of the presentation. And we're going to be telling you a little bit later on what you need to do to win that Horner swag. All right. Thanks, Casey, for showing us that. We'll bring in later in the show. All right, let's go ahead and get started with our topic. And that, of course, is language translation with the bonus topic of font handling. All right, so let's start talking about Seascape language translation. What is it? Well, it's the ability to support multiple languages in a single project so that operators at runtime can select an appropriate language for them. Now, believe it or not, you can support up to 24 languages in a single project. You know, I barely even knew there were 24 languages. However, translation is done manually, so there's no Rosetta Stone capability or speaking in tongues type capability in the OCS. You do have to manually do the translation, but again, in this multilingual environment and global environment, more and more folks speak more and more languages, so it's really not that big of a deal. Okay, now how does it work actually? Well, inside its memory, the OCS maintains multiple versions of all text that shows up somewhere on the screen. And that's true whether it's a text field, you know, it may be used for the title of a screen, legends on a push button or a numeric object, you know, text table entries for like hand off auto, that sort of thing, titles that you might find on a chart. All those things are text strings, and the OCS can maintain multiple versions of everything that shows up on the screen. And then when the user changes their language on the fly, a different set of text strings will be brought in for their visualization use. Now, there's a process you need to go through when you're actually going to be supporting multiple languages. Now, the first part of the process is identical to really any process, really, and that is you need to design the user interface as part of your project. And you're going to use your primary language, of course. Now, most of the people viewing this live stream are English speakers, not 100%, but most of us are English speakers. But one thing you want to keep in mind is English is not necessarily the most verbose language requiring the longest text strings. So you want to leave plenty of space in your objects for longer strings for languages like German, for instance, which tends to be much longer in terms of its verbiage. So keep that in mind when you're designing. But other than that, it's pretty much the normal process for designing your user interface. Now next, you're going to go to the graphics editor in Seascape, and from a special menu, you're going to export all these text fields, and effectively that copies it to the clipboard. And then you're going to perform a paste operation into a spreadsheet. And there in column A of your spreadsheet, you're going to see all the different text strings that are used anywhere in your OCS project. Now you've got the opportunity in columns B, C, D, etc., all the way out to column X if you're going to support 24 languages. You have the opportunity to fill in all the different text strings for each language that you want to be displayed when that language is selected. When you're done with that process, you're going to, again, from your spreadsheet, you're going to highlight all the cells that you want to paste back into Seascape, now containing multiple languages instead of just one. You'll do that copy, go back to Seascape, and execute the paste from that same menu where you did the copy to begin with. Okay, so that's the general process that you go through. Now, describing all that with slides is one thing, but of course, we want to be able to demonstrate that to you. Now, yesterday, I went ahead and pre-recorded this demonstration, which I sometimes do. And then going back and looking at it, I noticed that there was a pretty big mistake on my part in the translation of one of the particular terms. One of the languages that I did a translation of, there was one particular word that I pretty much screwed up on. Now, there may have been more than one, but there's one that I was able to recognize. So if you're able to recognize that word, which really was not correctly translated, then go ahead and chat that or post that so that Casey can see it. And the first person who recognizes that and chats that specific word is going to win the Horner swag. So that's what we meant when we said you're going to have an opportunity to win Horner swag today. All right, but without further ado, let's go ahead and get to the demonstration of precisely how we go about doing the translation of multiple languages in the OCS. Okay, what I have here is a simple demo program, obviously not much ladder. Let's take a look at the user interface side. Okay, so my primary screen is made up of strictly this selector object with a language selection. It's a 4-position vertical selector. Let me show you how it's configured. I'll double click here. Okay, so I've assigned a variable called language to this selector. Okay, and as you can see, there are 4 selections. Each of the items can be configured from here. Item 1 says English, item 2, Deutsch, 3, Idioma, 4, Francais. You can tell I'm quite the multilingual dude here. Okay, so those are my 4 choices for language. All right. And that's pretty much all that's on this screen, except for this jump button, which takes me to screen number 2, which is my operator station. Okay, so what I did here was I just did a simple start-stop operator station where I labeled the whole screen as operator station. I labeled this area as pump control, and then I have a text table object here labeled water level, and this is a selectable water level. I'll double click on this text table object, and I'll look at the text table here. Okay, so let me zoom into text table. So this is text table number 1, and currently the text table is effectively going to be selecting between low, medium, and high. Okay, now the longest string here is what? Medium, which would be 7 characters. But you'll notice I've assigned more than 7. I've made it longer. And this is just part of the overall strategy when you're going to be doing a project with multiple languages. Now, most of us attending this webinar are probably using English as our primary language. So when we develop a system for multiple languages, we're probably developing around English. But other languages can be quite a bit more verbose or wordy or, longer with longer words than English. So it's usually a good idea to give yourself extra space in your objects for longer text strings for other languages. Okay? So that's just kind of a good design consideration. All right, so at this stage, I've developed this very simple project with only two screens, several objects on it. I put the text where I wanted it. I'm pretty much ready, let's say for a really simple project, to move on to the multiple language portion of the project. So to do that, I do that right here from the graphics editor. And as you can see from the pull down area here, there is a menu called language. So let me select that. And here under options, let me click on that first. Okay, so under options, it's asking me to assign a language switch register. I happen to be programming this in traditional advanced ladder. It'd be the same even with advanced ladder with tags. So I'm going to go ahead and assign the same selector register that I use for languages on the first screen. Okay, so I had named that variable language, happens to be mapped to R1. All right, and then the next thing I have to assign is how many languages am I going to be supporting in this project. Now in this project, I'm going to go ahead and support 4. Okay, it doesn't hurt to have extra ones configured. You can have up to 24, but it doesn't necessarily buy you anything because you're going to have to come back into Seascape and add the additional languages later if you don't do it up front. So I'm just going to go ahead and set this at 4 for now. Now, some languages, as many of you know, especially the ones from the Asian areas of the world, those languages can often be right to left type languages as opposed to left to right. So you can identify of your 4 languages, or at least of the ones that aren't your primary language, which ones are right to left languages. In my case, I'm going to select ones, none of which are. So I'll just go ahead and hit cancel here. Okay, so I've now assigned my language switch register, and I've said I'm going to have 4 languages. All right, I'll hit OK. All right, so now I've assigned that register, and if we go back and take a look at these 4 languages that I've set up, this is English, German, Spanish, and French. At least that's my best guess, and if Google Translate is wrong, then I guess I'm wrong too. All right, so let's download this project to our controller. Now at this stage, I haven't plugged in any alternative language strings. So really all we should get are English. So let's take a look and see what we've got. Okay, so here's a view of my X4 OCS. I've got my 2 screens I can switch between. I can start and stop my pump. Everything's in English. I can change from high, medium to low water level. All right, and everything looks good. Now, if I actually were to hit one of these other buttons, you'll notice I suddenly have question marks everywhere. And that's because I haven't actually loaded any additional strings besides what's in there for my primary language. So that's obviously the next step. So we're back into Seascape, back to the graphics editor, and I'm going to go ahead and go back to the language menu. And this time I'm going to hit the export selection. And it's told me that the export to the clipboard is complete. Well, what does that mean? Basically, what Seascape just did is every single string that shows up on the selector as a legend, as part of this jump button, all these legends, all these text fields here, this text table, everything that shows up on the screen as a string has been copied to the clipboard. So the next stage is fire up our spreadsheet program and paste it in. Okay, so I fired up my spreadsheet here, and all I have to do is hit paste, and into the first column go all of the strings that I have used in my program. So now it's just a matter of filling in these other columns. I've already stretched out these columns here, and I'm just going to go ahead and put in headings to make it easy for me to keep track of things. So I'll go ahead and make that English, German, Spanish, and French. Now I'm not going to post these, I'm not going to paste these actual headings back in. When I do my copy and paste back into Seascape, I'll just do this area here. Okay, but that'll help me keep track of things. Okay, now if I were multilingual, I would just know what the translations were between the different languages, but I'm not. Also, I am aware that there are terms that are used kind of in conversational languages that don't really work very well in technical implementations of the languages. So I do know you have to be careful. But as an example here, I've just Googled up the American to German dictionary, and I'm just going to go ahead and type in, one of the terms that I need to fill in, which is water level. Okay. So water level, according to Google, should be Wasserstand with a capital W. Okay, very good. Now in Spanish, all right, I can just switch to Spanish language here. All right, and then I've got nivel de agua. All right, and then let's go ahead and go with French. And there you see the French translation. All right, this is obviously low tech, but it's one way of getting the job done, hopefully in a reasonable fashion. Now at Horner, we have multilingual folks working out of our European office, out of our Irish office actually, and for things like help files and other major translations that we need to do, we have some vendors that we use that can help us take care of that are not only familiar with translating the terms, but also understand technically how the terms are used, so we don't get ourselves in any trouble. But from the standpoint of, a controls engineer looking to expand the language support in a relatively straightforward application, this is obviously one approach. Okay, so we're back to the spreadsheet to fill in the information we just looked up. Okay, so these four, I want to copy those across because I want those to be displayed regardless of what language is selected at that time, because I want the operators for those individual languages to be able to recognize the language that they want to select. So we're going to copy those across. Okay, Now we're done. Remember, I added my own column at the top that I'm going to skip when I do the copy and paste back into Seascape. So I've highlighted just the section that is now containing the terms that are in the Seascape project. I'll right click and hit copy. Now back to Seascape. Okay, back to the graphics editor, back to the language pull down menu. Now we're going to press import. It asks if I'm sure I want to paste the strings from the clipboard and overwrite the current strings. I'm going to say yes. And now we're going to test it. How are we going to test it? Well, we go back to the language menu and under display language, change away from the primary language and see what we get. Aha! We switch to German and we got Sprache, pump. We look at the next page. That looks like German to me. So it appears to have worked. Let's go ahead and do a download and see if it works on the unit itself. Okay, here's our look of the unit. We've got English, German, Spanish, French. Let's go ahead and leave it on Spanish and switch. Here's our pump screen. There's all the translation that's been done. Let's go back here and let's switch to German. What's interesting is Google said that there was no translation for operator station to German. So we typed it in the way Google told us to. So who knows if that's right or not. I'm sure there's somebody out there who speaks some German that could probably tell us that we've made a mistake. Okay, and there's our French. Now you notice I didn't put in the special characters. You know, with French and Spanish especially, you've got those special accented vowels. Those can be put in with Excel when you're doing your translations, but you know, I didn't go to that level. Although if I was doing this for real, I certainly would have figured out how to enter in those characters. Okay, so that appears to have worked well. Hopefully you've got a good feel now for how the multiple language capability, or what we call Seascape language translation, works in the OCS. Okay, so I think it was pretty obvious what my mistake was, and we had multiple people that caught that. Well done. Let me go ahead and bring Casey in real quick. Casey, you want to kind of fill us in as to who our winner was?
Looks like we had 2 correct answers, but it looks like Stephanie Vasquez was the first to the punch.
Outstanding. So she noticed that idioma was actually what I put in there for Spanish when it should have been, I guess, Español, because idioma is Spanish for language. So I put it the wrong spot. So I know I said earlier in the demo that or in the show that, you know, it was a pretty easy mistake, and if Google made a mistake, then I guess I made a mistake. Well, it was my mistake and not Google. So, oh well, what are you going to do? All right, let's move on to our bonus topic now. Thanks, Casey, and congratulations, Stephanie. Way to go. Way to earn that Horner swag. All right, great job. Okay. All right, so let's, now that we've wrapped up language translation, let's go ahead and move on to our bonus topic today, which is Seascape font handling. So Seascape has several built-in fonts, as you've probably noticed. And depending on the controller you're using, the fonts can vary a little bit. You know, larger models tend to support larger fonts because the screens are larger. Makes sense, right? But Seascape also includes additional tools that not a lot of people use, I guess, which allow you to perform customization when it comes to fonts. So these tools include the Font Manager, the Font Creation Wizard, and then there's a legacy tool that I never use anymore. It's called the Font Editor. So we're not going to be covering that today. It's still in there, still in Seascape, but in generally, anything you need to do with fonts, you can do in the Font Manager and the Font Creation Wizard. Okay, so before we dive into the Seascape specifics on fonts, I wanted to cover a little bit ASCII versus Unicode. What are we talking about there? So both ASCII and Unicode are character encoding standards. ASCII has been around the longest. It's the original standard, and it supports up to 128 characters. And while that sounds like a lot, if you start thinking about multiple languages, you're really only going to be able to support, one language per character set when you're talking about ASCII encoding. So in the 80s, Unicode was invented, and it's now a much newer standard which supports many more characters. So literally, you could support over 1 million characters with a single encoded character set with Unicode. So that means obviously that supporting multiple languages in that character set is not a problem. The good news is it's backwards compatible with ASCII. So the first section of Unicode, the lower 128 characters, those are all identical to the character map in ASCII. So that makes things a little bit simpler there. But because of the sheer potential number of characters per character set, Unicode can require a lot of storage. So that's something to keep in mind. Keep in mind, an OCS doesn't have an unlimited amount of space to store custom fonts. Okay, so let's start talking about the Seascape specifics when it comes to font handling. So we're going to start with the Font Manager tool. Okay, so this is available in the graphics editor from the Tools menu, and it allows you to add or delete additional Seascape fonts to the project. Now, what are Seascape fonts? So Seascape fonts have been created one way or another and are residing in the FNT folder, in the fonts folder in Seascape, and they have .fnt as their file extension. Now, if you look in the default installation of Seascape in the fonts folder, you will find a couple of fonts in there. System, which is useful for retrofits of some of our older text-based OCS units. So the system font matches the character set for those old displays. And then another one called Tiny, which is useful for squeezing in additional text or numbers or whatever on small screen devices like X2s in the Micro Series or the XLE, for instance. Now, in addition to these two fonts, FNT files that you'll just find in there by default, other fonts can be created or imported using the Font Creation Wizard, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So the Font Creation Wizard is a tool for importing TrueType fonts and for creating those Seascape FNT files. And literally, you can import any TrueType font that's already residing on your computer in any size that will fit. Okay, and the reason I say that is because some of these fonts, especially the tall ones, can take up a lot of space, a lot of storage space. So you don't have, you don't have unlimited space to store those custom fonts. However, in addition to whatever's residing on your computer, additional fonts can be purchased and or downloaded from the web for import. Now, one thing I want to mention about that, and that is that there are a lot of fonts that you'll find that describe themselves as free fonts, but they're typically only free for personal use. Most of them are not free for business use unless you license them. So that's something to be careful of there. I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. Okay, so that's kind of the rundown on font handling. And once again, I want to make sure that we demonstrate this, that we don't just talk about it in slides, but that we go ahead and demonstrate it. So the next part of the demonstration is, again, another demonstration that I recorded yesterday, and we'll go ahead and play it for you today. And as far as I know, I didn't screw up really bad on anything, so we'll see. Okay, oh, and I see a question came in from Peter. I'm going to go ahead and display that now before we play the before we actually show the demonstration, and that is, in Seascape 10, will we be able to use bold, underline, etc. in any font? Well, I do know that there are a lot of additional font features coming in Seascape 10 this summer, and so being able to select different sizes and those sorts of things is certainly a capability you'll be able to see. Now, whether you can do underlining and bold, I'm not 100% sure of that. I'll need to double check on that. But certainly, if it's not available directly with Seascape 10, that would be a feature we could, we could add shortly thereafter. but I do know there's been a lot done on fonts for Seascape 10. All right, so let's go ahead and do a demonstration of the current capability with fonts in the OCS product line. Okay, we're back in Seascape, and we're back in that project we were working with before, and I've added a little bit to it, not much. Let's go ahead and take a look here. So I've added this jump button that's going to take me to a new screen. And the whole function of this new screen really is to display a pressure value in pretty large font. So hopefully a maintenance person who's working on the machine can see the pressure reading from a reasonable distance away. Now, you know, this is the biggest font that's included with the X4, and it's not that big. It's only 20 points. So I'd really prefer to have a much bigger font here. So I think what I want to do is I'm going to show you how to create a new font or import a font in a custom size. And in my case, I want a really large size so that the functionality of what I'm looking to accomplish can be achieved. Okay, so the first step in importing a new font is to go to the Tools menu here from the graphics editor, and let's go ahead and go to the Font Manager first. Now, this is where we can add pre-existing fonts. So let's go take a look and see if there happens to be a big font available for us to load that's already been created. Now, I happen to know there isn't, but I want to show you how to check. So we'll hit the Add button. Okay, and then let's go ahead and go to the Seascape folder, okay, which is under Program Files x86, Seascape, Fonts. Okay, so there's two fonts here. Those are the ones I was talking about earlier. System font, which is good for retrofits. It matches the fonts that are in the old legacy OCS 100 and 200 text-based units. And then Tiny font, which obviously is not a large font, which is not what we're looking for. So I'm going to hit cancel here. And so therefore the font didn't already exist that I was looking for. So I'm just going to go ahead and get out of the font manager. Okay, so when I know I need to create a brand new font, and I know there's not one that already exists, I don't go into the font manager, I go into the font creation wizard. So let's go ahead and fire that up. Okay, and I have three choices here. I can select an ASCII font, a complete Unicode font, or some subset of a Unicode font. Now, I'm working on a project which really just has Latin languages. You know, it doesn't have a Cyrillic or any of the, you know, kanji or any of the other, you know, Asian type languages. So in reality, an ASCII font would be just fine for me. But I'm going to go ahead and select the last option here, which means I can select a subset of a full Unicode font. And for illustrative purposes, it'll be good for me to select that one. Okay, so what we have here is, first of all, under the font list or pull down, we have all the fonts that are loaded on your computer. And I'm running off of an Intel NUC here, which is just kind of a stock Windows 10 installation. Pretty recent one, actually. So I still have tons of fonts. So I'm going to go ahead and go up to the top here and just pick the first one, Agency FB. That looks pretty good. I just need a much bigger size than what I'm currently, you know, limited to. So under font size here, I'm going to go ahead and select a much larger size. Let's bump it up all the way, let's say 72 points or so. All right, so I'll find 72 on the list. All right, there we go. Next, I need to select what portion of the Unicode command set, or I'm sorry, font set, character set that I want to actually import. So let's hit this subset ranges lookup table so we can get some sort of handle about what's available. And holy cow, look at all these sections of this font for all the different options here, all the different subsets of this Unicode font. Okay, now in my case, I'm just working on a Latin project, you know, German, French, English, etc., Spanish. So I don't need any of these special characters or these exotic, you know, character sets. So I'm just going to select the initial subset, which just so happens to correlate to ASCII, as they all do. Okay, so I've selected the default character set. I'm just going to go with the basic Latin for both the beginning and the end. And then I have to decide where I'm going to store this font once I create it. And Seascape has a kind of default location where they encourage you to store the file. So I'm going to go ahead and use that here. That is the fonts folder. Okay, and instead of calling it untitled, which really isn't very descriptive, I'm going to go ahead and select agency FB underscore 72. Okay, and I didn't show you this before, but I'm just going to pick a regular font. Well, why not? Let's pick a bold font. Why not? Okay, make it even more viewable from a distance. So 72 point bold. I'm storing it as agency FB 72. The last option here is, do I want to add the generated font file to the project automatically or not? And why not? Let's go ahead. I'm going to use this font on this project, so I might as well just add it automatically. If I uncheck this, after creating the font, I'm going to have to go back into the font manager and manually add the font in. So I might as well save a step, so I'll leave that checked, hit create font, it creates the font, and I finish. Now just to check my work, let's go back into the Tools Font Manager, and sure enough, it's there. Okay. Agency FB 72. Now, there were up to 128 characters available with ASCII. For this particular font, they only had 96 of them mapped, so that saved a little bit of space, I guess. And that's how much space, 134,992, is being taken up by this font. And that number is important because every OCS has a limited amount of font space, and smaller OCSs have a smaller amount of allocated space. So I happen to know that we're going to fit, but I'm going to show you how you can tell that it definitely fits. So I'm going to hit OK here. And instead of going right in and starting to use the font, I'm going to start using my error check tools. Now I can start out with the one here in the graphics editor, but it doesn't help me much. Yes, it tells me the font size, but it doesn't tell me a percentage of usage, which is really what I need. To get that information, I'm going to leave the graphics editor and go into the main Seascape editor and select the error check here. And here it not only tells you the number of bytes you're using, but the percentage that you're full. And in this case, for an X4, we've used up about half of the font memory with this one custom font. But that's okay. The default fonts are going to do, everything else that I need in the project. So the most important thing is I'm not over 100%, so I know this download is going to work. So let's go back into the graphics editor. Okay, let me maximize that view. Go to the page that has the big PSI reading on it. Now I'm going to go here into the font size, and instead of 20, I'm going to go ahead and pick what's now on the list, the Agency FB 72. There we go. I'll hit OK, and holy cow, we've got a much bigger font now. Let's make this sucker bigger. Let's move them up a little bit. And we're going to have to stretch them out if we're going to get engineering units on this thing. That's what we're talking about. Much bigger font, much easier for us to display large numbers that we can read from a distance. Excellent. That's what I was looking for. Okay, so we've created that. Now let's go ahead and download it to the controller, and let's see what it looks like. Okay, back to the live shot. We're back on our main screen. Let's switch over to the PSI screen, and there we go. Much nicer, larger font for being able to display that numeric data from a distance, significantly larger than what's built in, and a lot larger than the Legend, which I think is in a 10-point, as opposed to that nice 72-point font for displaying that data, the one we just imported. So hopefully that'll give you a good idea as to what's all involved in importing fonts and using them in your project. Once you've created a font, you don't have to create it multiple times. At that point, if it's stored in your fonts folder, you can then use the font manager to load that into a new project that you create from scratch. And that's all there is to it. Okay, so that's font handling in the OCS. And as Peter had asked earlier before we showed that demonstration, and I had answered, there are a lot of enhancements coming for font management that will be available in Seascape 10, but some of them are going to require some new models of OCS all-in-one controllers with more memory and those sorts of things in order to execute some of those new font features. So this approach for font handling for units in the field today will be around for a while yet. So it's important that we reviewed that today. All right, let me go ahead and bring Casey back in here. And we'll go ahead and kind of wrap things up. How's it going, Casey?
Not too bad. Technical difficulties aside. So.
Well, yeah, there's always that, right? So always trying to improve. We'll see what we can do to keep moving things down the road. So one thing I wanted to mention was that next week we have another show for you, another live stream, and that is getting started with Horner OCS. So a lot of our topics are kind of intermediate in nature. Sometimes they're a little bit advanced. This is one that even beginners, and especially beginners, are going to be able to get a lot out of. So we hope that our loyal customers that are repeat customers that have been with us for a long time, they're so valuable to us. But we have to continue to grow our product base, and so new customers are very important, and it's really important that we can bring them on board and help them get started in an efficient fashion. So if you're going to join us next week for getting started with Horner OCS, and we hope you do, once again, there's a couple different ways you can register. You can pre-register in today's comment section and then watch live on the YouTube channel. Or you can go directly to the comment in the YouTube next week during right when the show is about ready to start. And if you would sign in to let us know who you are, that would be wonderful. Again, we're really careful with any information we get. But it would really make us happy and really make Marcy's day as well. Okay, so let's not forget to, there we go. Let's not forget to subscribe to the Horner YouTube channel. Like this video, and if you can, please join us next week for getting started with OCS. Thanks for joining us.